Does Jeep or does Toyota build the better four-wheel drive system? Well, that's what we're going to find out today, because we're going to put the Jeep Wrangler Willys 41 and the Toyota Land Cruiser 250 series on the TFL slip test in a controlled environment, find out who builds the best 4x4 system, and then we're going to get them out into some dirt and put it to the test. All right, everybody, so this is the TFL slip test. Basically, we get both vehicles stuck on purpose in these rollers to see how the four-wheel drive systems, the lockers, the traction control systems work to get us unstuck. Now, this first test is going to be the rear wheel slip test, so both rear wheels stuck in the rollers. This Jeep defaults every day as a rear wheel drive car, so all the power is going to the rear wheels. So what you'll find is when I go into drive, I can give it any amount of throttle. That's now full throttle. We're stuck, right? Because the rear wheels are spinning, but there's no grip back there, so the car doesn't move. So what I'm going to do now is put this Jeep into four-wheel drive. That's going to engage the front end of the Wrangler, and now drive off. Okay, so we have proven that our rollers do in fact work, and that if you are driving through adverse conditions in your Wrangler, you have to remember to stick it in four-wheel drive, or there's a good shot you'll get stuck or spin or, do something you don't want it to do. So you got to pull back on that lever. So the Toyota has a very different four-wheel drive system because it is a full-time four-wheel drive. So there is no two-wheel drive setting at all. It's always in four-wheel drive, but it has a Torsen limited slip sensor differential with a lockable feature. So we're going to start out first in our normal road mode, everything unlocked, and let's see if we can get off the rear wheel slip test. So into the rollers, into neutral. Now I'm going into drive. So the rear wheel should be stuck, a little bit of accelerator. There we go. Okay, so it took a little bit of spinning, but that was actually a much better result than I've experienced in the past in a lot of these Toyota full-time four-wheel drives, because usually the slip test doesn't show off the benefits of a Torsen, but that actually was quite a good result. So I'm going to try it one more time, but now with the center differential locked up. There we go, center diff locked. And now onto the gas, the front axle will already be engaged, and we pulled right down. So better result that time than I've seen with these full-time four-wheel drive systems before. And you can see that that's one of the benefits of the Toyota over that particular Jeep, is it's always in four-wheel drive. There's no need to select a setting, right? Although Jeep does have an option for an auto four-wheel drive in the Wrangler as well. So next up, we have the diagonal slip test. So this is the left front wheel and the right rear wheel stuck in the rollers. Now this is very common off-road, right? Imagine going up our trenches course, you start lifting up tires, or in some vehicles, if you're going up, for example, a snowy, slippery curb, this is a very common situation to find yourself in. So we're in neutral, letting the vehicle settle in the rollers, then into drive. We're in 4 high in this Wrangler, no special modes, traction control turned on. So a little bit of spinning, and then ultimately pulled right down, right? So what happened there is the wheel started to spin, then the brakes started to grab the individual wheels and force wheel speed to the opposite corners, and we came right on down. So now for the diagonal slip test, I have the center differential still locked, so it's a little bit more apples to apples to what we did with the Jeep. And let's see how the Toyota does. Still in high range. Into neutral. Into drive. So the wheel should be slipping just a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I mean, very good result, right? Just the smallest amount of spin, Toyota came right down. That is very impressive. And, one of the things that I think Toyota really does well is their traction control programming. I mean, it is so quick and eager to respond. And yeah, it's just a very impressive system. So now we are stepping it up a notch. This is the 3-wheel slip test. So 3 wheels are stuck in the rollers, both front wheels and the left rear. Only the right rear is on the ground. So what I'm going to do is put this Jeep in a low range, because this is a very extreme test. You're only likely to find something this extreme off-road where you'll likely be in low range. Now, low range is interesting in these vehicles because fundamentally low range doesn't give you more traction. But in a vehicle like this Jeep Wrangler, it kind of does, because what it does is it puts the traction control in a more aggressive setting. So yeah, the actual act of multiplying that torque doesn't give you more grip, but that different traction mode in some ways does. So it's kind of confusing. So we're in neutral, we're settled. Let's see if we can get off. So in a drive, So the brakes are grabbing, you can feel it working, and we pulled down. So great result in the fact that I really didn't have to give it very much throttle at all. Just gentle throttle, you felt those brakes immediately kick in much faster than they would in 4 high to get us off the rollers. But I do have one more trick up my sleeve, because this Wrangler has an optional rear differential lock. It's standard in this Willys 41. So with the rear diff lock on, now both rear wheels should be spinning at the same speed. So when I go into drive, put off the brake, drives right off, no spinning at all. That is the advantage of rear diff lock, added traction, but in some ways just as important, added control. So in the Toyota now, for the 3-wheel slip test, we're going into low range, which is not a lever in this thing, it's just a little button. That's now ready to go. And let's see if we can tackle the 3-wheel slip test. Okay, into neutral. Now we're in a drive. Center diff still locked, but nothing else. Oh my God, these are so good. Toyota really has done something special. And that, what's crazy about that, is that was just in the normal setting. Now the Jeep does have an off-road mode. It's called Off-Road Plus, and it kind of smooths out your throttle input. The Toyota has multi-terrain select, which has different modes specific to the terrain you're on. So there's auto, sand, mud, and rock. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this thing into the rock crawl mode and then engage the rear locker. Just like that. That clicked on. And now it should just walk off with that rear locker on. Yeah, very impressive. So I got to say, guys, I mean, both of these machines have incredible programming for the 4-wheel drives, but the Toyota is just that much faster to actually engage. All right, now for this final test, we have one front wheel on the ground. Now, if I had a Wrangler Rubicon, I could lock up the front diff, but I don't. So we're gonna have to rely on the systems, and this is usually the hardest test because it's much easier to push a vehicle out of a tough situation with the rear wheels than it is to pull a vehicle out of a tough situation. So I'm actually gonna try a really cool piece of tech in this Jeep. If I push a button up here on the dash, there's something called select speed, and it's kind of like off-road cruise control. I can now use the shifter to select a setting that will maintain a constant speed regardless of what I'm traveling over. It's kind of like the crawl control system we're about to test, but Jeep's version. So I'm going to select 1.2 miles an hour, let my foot off the brake, and see if the computer can figure it out without me touching the gas. So here we go. I'm off. I'm off the brake. This is all the Jeep now. Working at it. Come on, Jeep. All right. So quite a bit of effort, actually. You can really feel the combination of the engine, the transmission, and the traction control working to find that grip, but it ultimately did get me off the rollers. Final test in the cruiser. Front wheel slip test. Now, this time I'm going to use crawl control. Into drive, push the button here. And I use the second speed on the Jeep, so I will use the second speed on the Toyota as well. Just like that. Coming off the brake. Toyota's figuring it out. Easy, right? I mean, I think at least in the slip test environment, it's pretty impossible to beat the Toyota, with one exception, if we had the Wrangler with the front locker. Because the front locker is going to be immediate, whereas the crawl control takes just a split second, but it's so good that it's like, in this test at least, like 80% of the way to a front locker. That's how fast it is. Time for a real world application of the TFL slip test. So we're gonna find out how this Jeep does in our trenches course. Now I'm gonna turn Off-Road Plus on. That does smooth out throttle inputs a little bit, but it doesn't seem to add any additional traction, just makes it smoother off-road. And then let's try select speed. So there's a button here on the dash called select speed, and I'm going to use the shifter to set it at, we'll do 1.2 miles an hour. So rear locker is off. This is all the computer. It's computer versus computer right now in the Jeep world. And what's cool about this is it kind of effectively 2 foots for you. So it's holding not only 1.2 miles an hour, but you can hear it. It's actually revving up the engine a little bit, just past 1,000 RPM, but feels like it's holding back on the brake to keep this smooth. Okay, we lost a little bit of traction there, but not a big deal. Now this does have solid axles, of course, which is going to help keep the wheels on the ground, but it doesn't have a sway bar disconnect from the factory, although you could get a wrench out and do it your old-fashioned way too. But very good articulation even with the sway bar connected. Oh, struggling a little bit at the top. Computer working to figure it out. Yeah, okay. Not bad at all. So that's a really good tool, select speed, to use if you're going through like a really challenging rock garden, and you don't want to think about, you know, what to do with the throttle. You just turn that on and let the computer do it, and it really does some cool stuff. And I love that feeling of it kind of holding back on the brake and riding the torque converter to make sure that engine's in the power band it needs to be in to prevent jerkiness, and it does work pretty well. So next up, I'm going to go up trenches, and I'm just going to use my foot, and I'm going to turn the rear locker on. Pretty quick engagement out of this rear locker, actually. Very impressed with that. And the thing about these Wranglers is, if you can't get where you need to go with the wheelies and a rear locker, where you're trying to go is probably not meant to be reached. I'm just going to be honest with that. Because the capability with these BFG tires, the rear locking diff, the suspension system means that, I mean, it goes everywhere. These things are so capable out of the box. And I know it's very common and people love lifting them, putting on big tires and making them extreme in that sense, but you just simply don't need to. They're that good at pretty much everything you point them up. It's just amazing. Really makes me happy getting in this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the Jeep too, but I don't know. I think I'm getting old and soft. This thing is just so comfy and squishy. This Land Cruiser, the 250 series, or as it's sold abroad, the Prado, does have a couple upgrades to it. So we went ahead and added a set of Toyota accessory rock rails, along with the front skid plate and the rear diff skid plate. Now, personally, I think that stuff should be standard from Toyota, but we had to add it in this Land Cruiser trim. We also went ahead and stuck on a set of slightly oversized BFG KO3 tires on the stock 20-inch wheels and stock suspension. So it sits a little bit higher than it did from the factory, but that's just because it's got a little bit more rubber on it. Once again, something that Toyota, I think, should have done from the factory. So, just like the Jeep, this first time we're going to go into this 4-low, center diff locked, rear diff unlocked, and let's use crawl control. So, I'm going to go into the second speed of crawl control, take my foot off the brake and the gas, and let the Toyota do all the work. Now, fundamentally, very different suspension setup, independent front suspension, solid rear axle, both body on frame, and this is a 25 model year Land Cruiser, so it does not have the sway bar disconnect. But we're starting our approach here. Little bit of slip there from the Toyota. It feels like it's working harder than the Jeep did. Now, in some ways, I actually think it's faster to respond and more effective, and I think part of that is just because this Toyota weighs more, so it does have to work harder. But I like that effect of how the Jeep does that. Feels like it's kind of straining at the leash to get up it by holding the brake back. I know Toyota does something a little bit similar, but in some ways I think actually the Jeep being as slower to respond did make it feel, even though it felt slower to respond, did feel a little bit more effortless of that, which is interesting. But the crawl control system, still amazing. I mean, it's incredible what you can do with crawl control. And we might also be seeing some traction differences and some articulation differences there too. And I will say the Jeep kind of slid back on that top part of the hill. The Toyota did not. So in that respect, it did do better. The problem is, folks, it sounds like I'm grasping at straws here, and I am to some extent, because they're both just so good. I mean, they're both just incredible at this kind of stuff. But now we'll go up it again. Rear diff locked. Just going to use my foot this time around. Come on, rear diff. Let's lock up. Let's do it, buddy. There it goes. Slower to respond for sure. But lots of control. Plenty of clearance. Here's the thing about these Land Cruisers is people in the comments are like, oh, the clearance is terrible. But measured clearance really these days seems to have somewhat little effect to actual real-world performance. I think the actual clearance number on this thing was only 8.6 inches, but I've been up trails in this thing that vehicles with quoted 9 inches of travel scrape on, and this thing doesn't. So it's a interesting conversation, but very capable machine. And look, this doesn't tell the whole off-road story, right? I do have a sneaking suspicion, and I know this because I've done it, but I know that Jeep will go a little bit further off-road than the Toyota will because it's just smaller, it's lighter, it's more nimble. It's got better approach and departure angle, right? But still, this Toyota is amazing. It is incredible. And on the four-wheel drive comparison, they're neck and neck, but I do feel like from just a strictly programming standpoint, I think the Toyota's a little better. Now listen, folks, I understand that these two don't directly compete against each other, but in a lot of ways, they are both halos of their respective brands, the signature, the best that they can do. So I thought it'd be interesting to put them up next to each other. Now, in terms of price, this Land Cruiser comes in at about $70,000 MSRP, and this Wrangler comes in at about $57,000 MSRP. The reality of the situation is there's a lot more that goes into what makes a vehicle capable off-road than strictly how does its four-wheel drive system perform. Approach angle, departure angle, breakover, the curb weight, the ground clearance, the tires, right? These are all factors, but both manufacturers build a phenomenal four-wheel drive system, and they both will get you through all of the snow you could possibly imagine, and a lot of off-road terrain. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Which of these two performed better? A big thank you to Case behind the camera, and we'll see you in the next video.